Welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. There is so much noise on the interweb these days about what women should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to their fitness and health. Not only is it all too often tied to shame and fixing our bodies, it can also be incredibly detrimental to our health and wellness overall. The Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast sorts through the BS and offers advice and actionable, tactile steps to support and build a better relationship to your amazing body through every stage of womanhood. It aims to break the cycle of keeping women in the dark about their extraordinary machines and revolutionize the way we move, eat, and live so that our daughters and our daughters' daughters look in the mirror and feel exactly what they are: fierce, beautiful, and capable of everything. The revolution starts here. Hello, and welcome to the Women's Fitness and Health Revolution podcast. Coach Kinsey here, and I am so pumped for today's topic. So let's just cut the small talk, shall we? Let's get personal. Do you know when your next period is going to start? How about this one? Do you know when your last period was? Because for decades, when that question came up at my annual physicals / pretty much every time I went to the doctors, I literally had zero idea. Most of the time, my answer was something like, probably in the last month. Why humans born with ovaries are not taught immediately the importance of our fifth vital sign, aka a healthy menstrual cycle, will never cease to blow my mind. So the unfortunate truth, at least for now, is that, I shouldn't even say unfortunate, just the truth, and once we accept it, we can start making some awesomely radical and pretty easy to do changes, is that it's up to us to seek out resources that actually educate us on the fascinating miracle that is our ovulatory hormone cycle. It's up to us to track and keep an eye on any abnormalities, i.e. irregular cycle length, symptoms, pain, lack of sleep, etc. Advocate for our health or to our health providers, and then continue to advocate, because as has been the case with many women I have worked with and known, health providers are known for essentially gaslighting us into not trusting our body and then trying to slap a quick fix solution on us like birth control or antidepressants or hysterectomies, all of which, just for the record, I am deeply grateful exist. The problem is we're often not presented with all of the information to both understand all of our options / talk about underlying root causes that come with these options / educate us on irreversible changes that oftentimes can be avoided with different care protocols. This is just truly one of the things that always just gets me so dialed up. And I recognize that as a white woman, I do have to sit back with humility and also address that this gaslighting dials up 100, if not more fold, for women of color. Which is why I am so stinking grateful that there are humans out there advocating for medical equality, proper education around female hormonal cycles. The average gynecologist, for example, receives a total of 1 hour of menopause training in clinical practice. I'm sorry, what? Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who's amazing, she's the creator of the Galveston diet, was one of the first OBGYNs I've heard speak out and share on this appalling fact, and it truly blew my mind grapes. So there we go. That's kind of the issue right there, right? Like our doctors are not getting fully educated on the full scope of women's health. And P.S., if you are currently in perimenopause or think you might be, Dr. Mary Clay Haver is one of a number of fabulous resources to check out. And if you want even more resources, definitely go to the show notes and download my free checklist for perimenopause prep. The last 2 pages are fully dedicated to resources and experts, so you can deep dive and learn how to take care of and support your beautiful body. Point is, the world has a long way to go, and there is slow progress being made, but we don't really have to wait up for them to catch up, because there are people out there doing this and studying this and researching it for decades. It just hasn't quite made it mainstream because that takes forever. But one of the number one things we can do to keep an eye on our health, not to mention create a wonderfully deep connection with our bodies, you guessed it, you clever girl, you track our periods. I'm going to start this pod out by chatting about easy ways and free ways that you can start tracking your period today. And then I'm going to give you my personal top 4 reasons you got to track your period. And then I'm going to finish up, sort of tie it in with a little personal anecdote about how shifting my current style of tracking has not so low-key absolutely changed my life. So first things first, how the heck do we track? I will say this is one thing we've definitely had some progress in, but in a world full of data tracking and our country's disgusting swing on repealing pro-choice throughout various parts of this country, there are a lot of reasons not to trust apps. Personally, I have used Flow for many years, FLO. I heard about it first on the Functional Nutrition podcast with Aaron Holt, who you know I am obsessed with, probably 4 years ago, and I do think I paid $2.99 a month. And I still use that app as backup. I initially liked it because you had the option to share which phase of your cycle you were on with your partner, which I am a huge advocate of. I think it is incredibly important, especially if you're with a male, to start looping them in on women's health. And honestly, it's great to share with all partners. It loops them in on where you are at and allows them to offer compassion and support, or at the very least, maybe not take things so personally if you're in your luteal phase. And to my dudes out there, sorry if it makes you uncomfortable at first, gentlemen, to hear about our periods, but to be fair, I have been hearing about your dick and balls and have seen them drawn on every single bathroom stall since I've started hanging out with y'all. So sack up. I promise you can handle it. Plus, on a more serious side, part of normalizing research into women's health and sharing resources part of normalizing research into women's health and sharing resources with each other so that we can live out our best, healthiest lives truly comes from destigmatizing periods. They literally happen every month. We glorify pregnancy as a society, and rightfully so. It is freaking magic, but babies are hard to come by without a healthy cycle. Okay, so off my soapbox for now. My point is, I was into the sharing aspect of the Flow app, and we got it to work for a while, and Margot was super on board, but probably because I am truly awful at technology, somehow pretty early on, he stopped getting the email updates. Don't worry, I still talk about it all of the time. That handsome fellow knows exactly where I'm at all times in my cycle, and it is awesome. We'll talk more about why in a second. It can really help strengthen relationships to loop partners in. But for now, like I said, I am still on the Flow app. It gives me a great idea of how close I am to ovulation. It lets me know how high my chances of getting pregnant are throughout the month, which helps practice, in our case, safe baby-free sex. And it lets me track symptoms and then gives me really solid feedback on why I might be experiencing those symptoms around that stage of my cycle. Maisie Hill, who I've talked about a lot on this podcast, and in my mind is the goddess of periods, recommends the apps Clue, Kindra, and Natural Cycles. And I haven't, full disclosure, used these myself, but she, in her book, Period Power, which we'll talk about in a second, says some of the things that she loves about them is that they're user-friendly and alerts help you know if you're prone to forgetting where you're at in your cycle. They also simplify, unfortunately, and generalize experiences, so it can be hard to make comparisons month to month, which we'll talk about. But she said Clue is especially great because they don't sell data. Instead, they work with research institutes at Oxford, Columbia, and Stanford universities. She's also a fan that Clue uses a non-gendered interface, which is pretty darn cool. All of that being said, even though I have been technically using an app for 4 years, I still felt pretty darn removed from the rhythm of my cycle. And if you know me, you know that I don't love technology. So I really went on the app more just to clock when my period started and finished, so I could know if I was having regular periods, but I didn't really get great at symptom tracking or trend spotting throughout my cycle. But this has all changed, my glorious humans, when I read the aforementioned Maisie Hill book, Period Power. This book is a must-read on the Radar Fit reading list, and I'm going to link it up in the show notes, so get ready for your life to change. Maisie Hill talks about a style of tracking that she suggests in the book where each day you write the day of your cycle and one word that describes how you're feeling that day. This is probably shocking, but over the last few months, I may have gotten a little bit more verbose. The first month, I used a notebook and paper and was immediately a big fan because having been a coach for the last decade, I've seen time and again, both with myself and with clients, how stinking difficult it is to start a new habit and to stick with it, especially a daily habit, even if it is technically just writing one word. But I made it work. Once in a while, I would skip a day or two because I'm human, but then I just go back and write my word a little later on. But it never felt oppressive or like I dreaded doing it. And I managed to continue now doing it for over 5 months. So it is definitely a doable thing. And just give yourself permission if you miss a couple days to go back and fill them in on the backside. Something's better than nothing, right? So in month 2 of this one word a day, we hit the road and I forgot my notebook. Whoopsies. Turns out it was a totally happy accident because I switched to my notes app on my phone and a whole new benefit presented itself. I now can easily search back in my previous cycles just by searching for the day, i.e. day 23, personally my rough day, and start to spot trends about how I'm feeling on that day of the cycle, how I'm sleeping, if I should hide myself from the world because shiz is about to feel real rough emotionally. Point is, to wrap this portion up, however you prefer to start tracking, please do it. But I humbly do recommend doing Maisie Hill's one word a day on a device that lets you search and find previous days. And we'll talk a little bit more towards the end why this is so huge. And just as a reminder, as you do start tracking, especially if you're doing the word a day, day 1 of your cycle is the first day you have a full-blown period. So not like the little spots leading up unless you're a light bleeder, but day 1 is the first day you like have to do something about having a period. Okay. So now, why even bother tracking? If the self-advocacy wasn't enough to light your fire, buckle in, baby. I got 4 things we're going to chat about and sort of like a bonus 5th one. But number 1, irregularities in the length and duration of our periods are indications of underlying issues in our bodies. Remember, birth control is not a solution to our hormones. It is a Band-Aid that actually turns off our ovulation, and therefore it turns our hormones off. But a lot of times for most women, as soon as we come off the birth control, those untreated symptoms come back with a vengeance. And I've said it before in previous podcasts, but at age 15, I was put on the pill because I had my period for over the month, which, yeah, I know, super jealous. And while it sucked because it was a full month of bleeding, I just wasn't told any other options beside the pill. There was no discussion that this is actually a pretty normal thing when we're in our early years of our period because our body is literally practicing having a period. So in hindsight, I've learned there's a pretty good chance that if I would have just rode it out, it would have stabilized on its own. But instead, my natural cues and my hormones were shut down, and I ended up spending 10 years on the pill with crazy cramps, constant bloating, and deep depression to the point where by the time I came off the pill, I was also taking 2 different types of depression and anxiety medications, all of which I stopped after being off the pill. Again, I'm in no way advocating for no medication. Having the pill as an option is done incredible things for women across the board. And antidepressant, well, I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing that we have access to these tools. And I would do anti-anxiety meds again in a heartbeat along with therapy if I felt the way I did when I went on them the first time. I love these modern tools for us. But I also believe we need to be given the full story of what to expect from these meds and told our full list of options and protocols, not just, hey, these are the side effects, good luck, but also these are other things that could potentially work, especially since so many issues women are put on birth control for can be minimized or solved through lifestyle changes with nutrition, movement, stress management, and sleep. Point is, if through tracking we see that each month our period is a different length or that the day we start our period on is wildly different, it's a pretty solid indication that something's off hormonally, and we'll want to get to the bottom of why. One extra step you can do to prep for going into your doctor, that self-advocacy bit, is running through a list of lifestyle clues for more information. So asking yourself questions like, Am I eating a lower inflammatory diet with lots of fiber, colored fruits and veggies, and quality protein? Am I moving my body? Am I sleeping well? And am I sleeping enough at night? How is my stress level? No, really. Categorically, women are known to deeply underqualify their stress levels because society has just sort of decided that should be the baseline for women, and we shouldn't question it. Keep your job or run your business. Manage your household. Take care of your kiddos. Exercise. Do everything perfectly. Slash your calories and make sure to smile and bear it. Because even amazing things we love, like the job we love or moving our bodies or the children we love so much, they very much and do cause stress in our lives. And stress is one of the biggest contributors to hormonal issues. So obviously I'm not saying throw it all to the wind, but if we can notice and be honest with ourselves where stress is coming from, we can start making choices to either set some boundaries or to put some self-care practices in place. Knowledge is power. Once you have that list, bring it to your doctor, again, so that you can advocate for a protocol and care plan that actually serves you. Options. Ask for options. You are worth it. So our next reason that we need to be tracking is to keep an eye on our symptoms. Pain is not normal. This is another huge disservice society has set up for us, that we tongue-in-cheek talk about periods as if debilitating pain is to be expected, and then essentially told to shut up and don't whine and just deal with having a period that literally cripples us and leaves us in heaps on the floor. False. Overly heavy flows, painful cramps, pain around ovulation, sore breasts, severe depression, these are all hormonally related. Oftentimes, this can be due to excess estrogen, which sometimes is due more to the inability to clear estrogen out of the bloodstream and or tied to low progesterone. Sometimes, more often than we think, it ends up being a condition like PCOS or endometriosis or uterine fibroids, which can be related, as I previously mentioned, to hormone imbalances or, as I've been starting to read a little bit more in certain studies, vitamin deficiencies. There's one study in particular I was looking at where vitamin D deficiencies have been found to play a huge role in uterine fibroids. So there's just so many things that we can look at and address before jumping to, or need to address. For example, if you've got endometriosis, PCOS, uterine fibroids, definitely talk to your provider because you deserve to feel good in your body and there are solutions there. But please see your doc. Bring your list of symptoms and run your checklist of food, movement, sleep, and stress. You deserve to be pain-free, my friend. Okay, the third reason that I think is one of the top 4. One of the first signs of perimenopause is irregular periods. So if you have been consistent with your periods for forever and nothing has changed in your external environment, but suddenly things are off, especially if you're having co-symptoms of perimenopause, which are vast. I believe I've heard there are now up to 150 possible symptoms, all different in different women. Things from low mood to irritability, hot flushes, terrible sleep, itchy ears, lack of libido, achy joints, and oh, so many more. This is a pretty fabulous time if you notice this in conjunction with irregular periods, or even if just a handful of these symptoms, to get thee to a perimenopause specialist and get your hormones tested. Here's the fun thing, and we aren't going to deep dive into this on this podcast, but unlike birth control, bioidentical hormone therapy used to treat symptoms of perimenopause are a beautiful gift and a great option for oh so many women, especially when we started early on in perimenopause. And if you want to start exploring and learning more about that right now, check out Dr. Stephanie Estima of the Better Podcast, Dr. Lovely of Not Your Mother's Menopause Podcast, Esther Blum of the book See You Later, Ovulator, Dr. Vonda Wright of Hot for Your Health podcast, and a resource called MIDI, which is a teledoc resource that is trained specifically in women's health and takes the time to listen to you and your unique experience and symptoms. It accepts most insurances, and it actually helps set you up with hormone therapy if it's something that you decide to do. And I'm going to drop their link in the chat because I do think this is an incredible resource right at our fingertips. And I have a client who's using it right now, and I think has really felt a lot of freedom with it. Point is, do not be in the dark about that when this chapter of your life kicks in. Perimenopause gets a bad rap, but information is both power and the key to a smoother transition into this next baddie chapter of our womanhood. And finally, the fourth major reason I advocate for women jumping on the tracking bandwagon has everything to do with number 4, drumroll please. It makes our lives gentler and better. We are so hard on ourselves. Honestly, I'm hard pressed to think of an ovulating friend who doesn't have extreme standards set for themselves. Things that we would never expect or ask of a friend. And it sure doesn't help that our burnout culture fans this flame on the reg. But here's the kicker. Our bodies, I'm talking all humans, our species, were not designed to go 24/7, 365, or 366, because it's a leap year. Anyway, ancestrally, we are programmed to exist with the seasons. Times of rest were naturally built into our winter months when everything was dead, and hotter days of summer months when it would be unhealthy to be out working. And as ovulators, this seasonality breaks down even further into our monthly cycle. And I did a pod recently about tracking our periods for optimal training and fitness in episode 19. I'm going to drop the link in that bio because it is worth a listen. And we talked there more in detail about the seasonal phases of our monthly cycle. Like I said, definitely recommend going back. That's a word, right? I recommend going back and giving that episode a listen as our honorary 5th benefit of period tracking, because helping with our fitness performance and recovery rocks. And it is a little known fact, and I've gotten some pretty good feedback since releasing that podcast. That has been a blast to hear about ladies just rocking their workouts. Anyway, the takeaway here, tracking our periods, especially the Maisie Hill version of a word a day, gets us in touch with how we feel and relate to the world in this seasonality of our cycle. She goes into great detail in her book, Period Power, but a quick overview. Oftentimes, it is super common to feel tired and withdrawn from the world in our winter phase, which is the start of our period. We can oftentimes feel outgoing and focused in our spring, that time leading up to ovulation, feeling confident and sexy to boot on top of the world at ovulation, and then critical and assessing in our fall, those days after our ovulation. And of course, it varies from body to body, but after tracking for a while, some amazing things happen. And they certainly have for me. So this is where I'm just going to swing full-blown anecdotal here and would love to hear about your experience with tracking, especially if you want to share with the women's fitness and health revolution community, because I think it's so cool for us to share our stories. That's how we continue to grow. But I personally have found that I have just an incredibly higher level of compassion for myself than I ever had before. And I've been doing work on this, full disclosure, for like the past 6 years, but this took it one step even deeper. First, just because this is fitness and health, I approach my workouts differently. Like I said, I go deep in episode 19, but the Cliff Note version, I was so hard on myself when my performance was not at 100% of the time. And it turns out, after tracking, I found that for the last 2 weeks of my cycle, my performance is not at 100. It might not even be at 50. And that was 2 weeks of feeling like a failure every single month, when in actuality, it was just really 2 weeks of my hormones declining. And I've found now that slower strength training not only feels better, but also helps me hold on to muscle during that high progesterone time. And on the first 2 days of my period, y'all, I sleep. It is a full-blown sport for me, nap time. Secondly, and maybe personally, I feel a lot more at peace with who I am and how I respond to the world. One of the ways that I've been really hard on myself in the past is that it's been really hard for me to accept that I have emotions outside of being happy all the time. I spent a long time as a kid patting myself on the back when I could get people to laugh or make them happy. And any time that I was sad or angry or felt a negative emotion, it felt like I was doing something wrong. And I think I share this because I know that I've talked to others who can relate. And sometimes, especially in those negative states, it wasn't even just that I was failing at the being happy, but I felt truly out of control and in deep, deep fear that, oh my God, this is it. I'm just an unhappy person now. And that for a long time was one of my biggest fears. In the past 5 months of this Maisie Hill style of tracking, a huge trend I have found for me is that around days 23 to day about 27, I do feel pretty deep hopelessness. It doesn't necessarily manifest into my world, but if I'm being really honest with myself, I feel lonely, I feel unloved. And in the past, like I said, this time was really scary because it truly feels like this is it. This is who I am now. But now when I feel this way, I can go back and look at my chart, and it doesn't necessarily make me snap me out and bring me back to rosy-eyed, but it helps me remember that this is only temporary. It's related to my hormones, and it allows me to feel less scared that I'm going to feel this way forever. And it also allows me to plan for it. So now I know that when day 23 comes up, it might be a day that I just really need to lean into some self-care and rest. And that is huge. It also, as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit about it here, has helped me with my relationship tenfold, because it is hard to expect our partners to, we can never, here's something else I've learned in the relationship dating over the last, 20 years, 35, how long, whatever, point is, over my lifetime of being in relationships, we can't expect our partners to mind read. It sure would be great. But it's just probably no one is capable of that. And it's impossible for our partners to know what we're going through and how to help us if we don't know what we're going through and how to help us. So it has helped my relationship tenfold because I can let Marge know, hey, I'm coming up on day 23. Or when it's happening and maybe I react big because I'm human, or maybe I'm just feeling really sad, I can say something like, hey, I'm in a place where I'm feeling really lonely. It has nothing to do with you, but if you want to give me a few more hugs in the next few days, I'm super here for it. Our partners love us. The people in our lives love us. And it has been so helpful for both of us, for me to ask for what I need at certain times, whether it is those extra hugs, or maybe it's a bit of space, or a low-key evening. If I'm feeling combative, maybe it's the heads up not to take it personally, and also remind myself that it's my job to work on how I relate and respond to my emotions, and that sometimes it's okay just to take a beat. And also, on the other side, I love planning a date night when I'm in that spring and summer season. Those hormones are high. You're feeling good. Estrogen is taking control. I mean, talk about spicing up a long-term relationship. If you know when you are ramped up on the estrogen, plan accordingly. All this is to say, I now have a deeper appreciation for what my body is going through, and I know how to ask for what I need. And instead of trying to tamp down or change or criticize the way I feel, I work with my body and plan accordingly for those days I need a bit more self-love. And because I trust my partner, I'm able to wrap him on that, and it's made both of our lives a little bit gentler. So there you go, my raters. My top 4, but honorary 5 reasons you got to track your menstrual cycle. 1, irregularities in the length and duration of our periods are indications of underlying issues with our hormones. 2, please keep an eye on your symptoms. Pain is not normal. 3, one of the first signs of perimenopause is irregular periods. 4, it makes our lives gentler and better, and you deserve that. And honorary 5, we can optimize our training. Hello. As always, it means the absolute world to me that you have spent this last chunk of time learning about ways to take care of your incredible body yaddy. We don't have any new reviews to read today. Maybe next time. But if you are feeling particularly generous or feel like you have been getting information that's been making a difference in your life or in your health, it would be an absolute honor if you took 1 to 5 minutes to leave a quick review or a 5-star rating. My goal with this podcast is to truly make this resource free and available to any and all fellow ovulators so we can finally start learning about and advocating and caring for our health and our bodies. And reviews, ratings, as well as sharing on social media and with loved ones is a great and pretty much the only way a grassroots podcast like this gets into new ears. So thank you beyond thank you in advance for taking time to share the love. You are incredible. Here is to taking care of ourselves and tracking our cycles, because you and your bodies are so stinking worth it. Until next time, Raiders. Aroo!